There we go.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Right. Well, thank you for everyone coming back to another episode of Scrutinise This. I am the podcast novice. I know very little about film. I watch them. Sometimes I don't really understand them, but I'm with two great people who can explain to me exactly where I'm going wrong with regards to movies. All right, we've got
Yeah, we
Dennis.
try.
Well,
A lot of pressure.
there's no pressure. There's no pressure at all. We've got people in the industry themselves, and you've got someone who's watched maybe a handful of films. And in this series, we're going to be discussing the Best Picture nominees for the Oscars this year. Okay, right now we are on the Holdovers. So we've done a few other episodes on this before, which you can go back and listen to, and obviously subscribe and comment to the Scrutinise This podcast. But today we're discussing the film The Holdovers, which is, the way I understood it, was a film about a teacher, a little grumpy teacher, who's being punished by the headmaster for something that he did, to look after 5 students and is it a caretaker? Is it the woman's a caretaker? I would say she's
a
caretaker.
cafeteria
She's
manager.
a chef or a cook, no?
She's a cafeteria manager. Is exactly the way she's described.
The cafeteria manager. There we go. So he's got to look after 5 kids and the cafeteria manager over the Christmas period. And because he's very strict and very grumpy, obviously he doesn't get on really well with his students. And then it ends up just being the one student, Tully, and Mary, the cafeteria manager. And it's about how they sort of get on in this environment. You've got a very strict teacher. You've got a very... I don't know how to explain Tully. He was a mischievous kid, would you say? He's pretty mischievous.
He's considered brainy, but a bit problematic, a bit in your face, especially early on, yeah.
Exactly, and we also got Mary, who's mourning over the recent death of her son as well. And it's just about how they spend Christmas together, how they everyone kind of slightly changes to become more tolerant towards each other. And then it's about ultimately how the teacher gets fired and Tully doesn't get kicked out of school and the cafeteria manager doesn't really go anywhere. She kind of just stays there. So that's a summary briefly about the film. I hope I've done it justice, and obviously you guys can correct me if I've said anything wrong. But that's something that I found just interesting, that something happens with Tully. So he doesn't get kicked out. He has a better relationship with the teacher. The teacher gets fired, and he ultimately goes and does his dream of, in the writing field. Mary kind of stays there. Do you think this film struggles to maintain multiple storylines throughout the film?
I think we might interject with a little correction there. That there isn't. The film itself is quite contained. There's not a lot of storylines going on, but each character has a specific backstory, which we're kind of drip fed. The film itself is quite simple, right? It doesn't deviate a lot. It kind of just follows them around. The film doesn't resort to flashbacks or anything.
Okay.
So the backstories are just kind of shown to us gradually.
Okay.
I think even correct even a bit further. I mean, not only is the story contained. I mean, from large parts of it, we're only in one space, right? It's not until the second half that we even break out of the school space. But also to correct on another early point, I think it's important sort of story element that so Paul Hunnam, who's the professor, he not only gets fired, he sacrifices himself effectively for Tully. He kind of makes this epic gesture. That obviously becomes a huge element to the story. And I think it's interesting, the reason that you call it almost like multiple storylines, I think it's because we're coming from a series of films where the characters are so limited that it feels like when they're so fleshed out, you kind of resorted to calling them storylines, which I think is one of the interesting parts of this movie. But you were about to ask a question, and I've been so rude. Please spank me. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, okay, so it's not multiple storylines, it's one main storyline, which is about the teacher.
Right, yeah.
Correct. Okay.
The thing is, I mean, we're in a sort of dilemma here, because we're either discussing semantics or we're discussing film structure here. So if you mean to say that, I mean, all the stories have fleshed out backstory. So a backstory is obviously the development of a character. So any movie, pick one off the top of my head, any movie will have some sort of backstory to the character, however fleshed out. I mean, a movie could even play on the fact that there's a lack of a backstory, obviously, to develop that character. But in this movie, the plot is linear. Like Ron said, we don't flash back, we don't flash forward. Once the film develops, we obviously revolve everything around Paul Giamatti's character, but so the professor, the cafeteria manager, and the student. And once once the movie is established, those three characters, we never actually leave those three. We never leave the confines of those three characters, even when they move location. So the story is very linear, and the plot, if we think of it as an arc, is actually very simple arc. It doesn't really Pulp Fiction at any point. So it's a very straightforward film in that sort of plotline sense. But
another thing,
the backstories are fleshed out, men say.
Another thing to add to that is a character like Professor Paul Hunnam. He's actively trying to not. He kind of lives behind a wall of words and a wall of like classic academia, right? He doesn't want to let his true backstory show. He's trying for most of the film to pretty much hide himself and hide his backstory from anyone else.
Yeah.
So it's only really revealed the sort of his history with the successful now professor at Harvard because of chance, because it wasn't by his design or because he wanted to confess it himself. So that's kind of an interesting thing to add. The backstory's kind of been obscured from the viewer as well as from the other characters. Yeah. Just because of he's got a very obstinate character and he doesn't want to reveal too much.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Guys, this is why I'm the novice. This is why these guys are the pros.
You came out of your novice hole for a reason. We're glad to enlighten you.
And right back I go into it. Okay.
After this, straight away.
We package, as soon as these podcasts are done, for people interested, we package Bardi away in a little
bit of homework.
Yeah, we package him a bit like in the Barbie scene when she goes back into the box. We sort of put him away in a box, and he's just in a sort of film stasis until we have the next episode.
Do you see the scene when they first do the test and he's giving out the results and it says like F? This is how this is how you two grade me after each episode.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that we're doing a film about grumpy teachers, because I feel like Ron and I are trying to, give that.
I did see myself in the.
When I was watching the film, I was thought to myself, "Oh my god, that is Rowan. That is Rowan if he had a mustache."
That's Rowan, post beard Rowan.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Buddy, when I was a little girl, I dreamed about you asking questions to us.
Okay. Well, I on that note, since we are obviously talking about film, is there anyone's performance that you would praise in that film?
That's such a loaded question because you're assuming that there might be one performance which is
no. You
great.
Can also say there's none. There's zero. You can also say
no. But my point is, I think all of them do a great job. I honestly, I think they really do. They kind of live and breathe the character they're given. So yeah, I think.
Really?
I mean, interesting to talk just about the nominations.
Yeah.
Best Picture has been nominated for, obviously, because that's what we're talking about it. But then it's been nominated for the two acting awards, Paul Giamatti, and the actress Davine Joy Randolph, who plays the cafeteria manager.
Mary Lamb, yeah, she's the cafeteria manager.
So it's an actor-heavy set of nominations. I mean, there's only three, but
But Buddy, so give us a kind of preempt us a little bit. What's your novice? I mean, not to be super flippant with that word, but what's your novice take on it? Because your reaction there, felt like you instinctually recoiled.
Had a tinge of skepticism about it.
Yeah,
I wasn't impressed. I like the teacher's performance. I thought he was good. Obviously, I think he could also be improved as well, because we always see that with anyone who's any kind of character that's kind of strict. At some point in the film, they kind of break down that wall and they change from who they were to, what they become. But I wasn't impressed with the kid or even Mary at all.
You're not impressed with Dominic Sessa?
Nah. No, not really. Honestly, I just wasn't feeling it. I was watching the film. I just wasn't feeling the performance from anyone. Even when Mary's mourning over her son, it just felt a bit flat. The performance overall just felt flat for me.
But what so do you because after this I'm going to sort of step back a little bit and give my own little sort of Dennis intro to the movie, because I think there's some interesting things worth noting. But just quickly, in terms of the acting, flat is an interesting word of choice. Do you feel then by the end of the movie, do you feel because of their performances, do you feel you weren't satiated maybe by the plot? Did you feel like, I don't know, disappointed in a filmic sense?
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed. I was, yeah, definitely.
You mean because of the plot or the performances?
A bit of both. A bit
Okay.
of both. For me, obviously, if someone's mourning over their son, or if this kid feels like, you know, he's been left out of everything, you want to be able to sort of really feel that coming through and be like, oh, do you know what? I can sort of resonate a bit with that character. Or obviously, I can't resonate with losing the son, but you want to feel like you're almost there with them, you know, through that pain and through that struggle. And I just wasn't feeling it when I was watching it.
But that scene in that party scene in the kitchen when she's drinking too much, having a fag and crying, I thought that was quite a moving scene. I thought it was done quite well.
Yeah.
Did you not? Do novices not have feelings?
We do. And sometimes we're a bit more sensitive than you guys. But nah, I didn't.
Okay.
It just I didn't feel it.
I'm gonna step back a little bit and like I said, give my own sort of intro, because for those who don't know, Alexander Payne is the director of this movie. So
he's been a favorite of mine ever since Election and
Election.
Ruth.
He did
Something
About
Ruth.
Schmidt. He did About Schmidt. He did
Citizen
Sideways.
Ruth was his first film, 1996 with Laura Dern.
Oh,
Sideways, equally really, really good, with Paul Giamatti as well.
Yeah, he went on to do Nebraska. He did Downsizing, which people were a bit sort of it became.
It's funny
because
he works so well in his genre, right? He's great at comedy and satire and working with like banal sort of.
Well, I think more specifically, he's a great dark comedy. You know, he's able to bring out sort of subtleties in characters, and a lot of the time, if you look through, there's always a kind of a flawed decision, a flawed character. So Downsizing is one that I mentioned. I think About Schmidt would be another example. He's obviously a director that stems almost from that Sundance style of, I wouldn't call it indie, because indie has obviously ramifications in terms of budgeting and things like that. But his films tend to be very low key. A lot of the music that you hear suggests to us that it has that kind of indie vibe. I think with this film coming into it, I actually interestingly knew so little about it. I had sort of tuned out of Alexander Payne world, and I came into it a bit naked. And I think obviously early on it sets out its kind of table, right? It has a very clear style, and I'm sure you're going to ask us about the way that it looks and so on. It's obviously set post-Vietnam. It's in that era, certainly. I think it's 71. They celebrate the New Year.
Yeah,
1971.
It's during the war still, yeah.
Okay, so, and then obviously the war has clear ramifications on the characters. Ron mentioned the scene where she's crying in the kitchen, which I actually thought was very moving. It reminded me a little bit of a scene from The Five Bloods, if people have seen that, by Spike Lee, where they go back to Vietnam and he has a bit of a breakdown, one of the characters, and it's just a sort of it's this quick moment. Alexander Payne is quite good. People have seen other movies of his. He's quite good at introducing these little sort of, I mean, I wouldn't even call them melodramatic, I think, because they're quite true to life, but these little set pieces, which obviously align us more with these characters. And in this movie, it's almost like the perfection of his craft in a way, because we get given these three very sporadic characters and with very little reason to really relate to them. And especially the student, he sets himself up as being completely unlikable and pushing everyone away. And the professor, in a different style, does the same thing. And obviously what the film does over the course of the plot is actually bring us and them closer together. So for that, I think it's all in the performances. So I have to agree with Rowan here that especially Paul Giamatti, I mean, I mean, that performance, it on sort of first watch, it can seem a little bit, I don't know, churlish. Maybe he's putting on a bit too much of a character, but super nuanced and so kind of heartfelt. I mean, there was points at the end where it's probably the most emotional I've been watching any of these kind of Oscar contender movies so far, because it's so driven, that story. There's a great scene as well where he finds that the boy's using the same antidepressants as him, and there's a great shot where the boy closes the bathroom door. Obviously, he's being a bit cavalier. He doesn't want to discuss it openly for obvious reasons.
He takes a toast. And
he just there's a split second where he just sort of stands and looks at the door. Paul Giamatti's character just sort of, and is in that moment is very Alexander Payne, that moment, but done so well, so meaningful, and obviously with this background of Vietnam and sort of the advent of, I mean, we're talking about film styles. Obviously, there's television shows and there's these kind of reality TV shows and so on. I think it's all framed in a very clever way, but I don't want to keep rambling because I got a letter from a viewer called my mum, and she said stop rambling. So Bardi, hit us with a question.
That's the shortest answer we've ever had from Dennis. I don't know, is that can we put some fireworks up on the display here, please?
It was only 8 minutes only, that
and it's only 20 minutes. Oh my. But okay.
He also had some great lines as well, just like bringing everything back, obfuscating everything and bringing it all back to the ancient Phoenicians or whatever, he lived behind that wall of sort of erudition or whatever.
I'll tell you what, the funniest line, because it is a comedy.
You're careening towards a suspension.
Yeah. Penis cancer.
What's the kid's name that Tully doesn't get on with? What's his name? Is it Teddy?
Oh yeah, the good-looking little kid, yeah.
Yeah, well.
There's always
why do you have to add the
why do you have to pick up on it? Is
you picked
it's true. No, why do you pick up on me picking up on
it? Ron's like, I'm racking my brains. Who did I feel horny over? Oh yes, of course.
It's not Ryan Gosling. It's
he's going through.
But no, when he's looking at Tully and he goes, I will full on nut punch you. That made me laugh. that fully made me laugh.
For most people, life is like a henhouse door or ladder or some shit like that.
Shitty and short, he says.
Yeah.
Shitty and short. You were born lucky. Yeah, that's a great line.
But it's that moment that makes you like him a bit, right? Because he takes pity on Lamb early on, right? And he has a dislike to the sort of like entitlement of the kids. If it wasn't for that, you would be so set against him, right?
Yeah, I mean, he toes the line very interesting. I think this is another great performance. I think obviously a lot of it is in the script, without doubt. And I don't know if the script's nominated, but
it hasn't been nominated. But the script fucking should be nominated. It should take Barbies or some other of these other films.
Yeah, it's an incredible script.
I wouldn't go that far. Come on, guys. Come on. I know you guys are film scholars, but come on, let's be realistic.
But don't you think it should at least take Maestro's position? Come on, man.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Because you can admit the dialogue has such a
Maestro's
richness,
such
a tapestry to it.
No, I'm joking.
Back in your hole.
No.
Back in your hole.
But Paul Giamatti's character, he toes the line again, because we have this backdrop of Vietnam War, and anyone that's seen kind of 60s, 70s, literally of that time. I don't mean set in that time, but films from that era. There's obviously a very kind of this sort of burgeoning conservative value versus the kind of new liberal value in the US, and obviously a lot of the time that kind of is in conflict with a lot of movies of that era. If you watch something like Hairspray or whatever. But with this, it's interesting that Paul Giamatti's character, obviously he's established as being a very, he's a man of the old, right, man of history. He's very into that, but he starts to break out into these moments where obviously he says things like, you entitled little shit and so on. So he's obviously got a sense of entitlement, a dislike of it. But at the same time, he throws in these great lines that he delivers so well. Where there's one scene where they're sitting down to have dinner and they're waiting for her to join them. And he says, "Stand up for the lady, you bore." And he just drops that line, and he says it so, I don't know, it's kind of carefree in a way. But he kind of slips back into this kind of, I don't know, the conservative liberal balance is very well played in that character, and it makes him a lot more likable, right? Because they could have gone for a very hipster kind of, I don't know if people have seen, like, well, we mentioned Ryan Gosling, but this kind of like half Nelson kind of vibe of teacher. But instead with this, they play a very interesting history teacher, but he kind of has this burgeoning kind of liberalism. And obviously we find out over the course of the movie the sort of rationale behind his decisions. But I think that in the script, I mean what Ron was saying, I mean, Maestro, one of the most bland scripts. I think the three of us could sit in a room and, Wikipedia someone's life and make a Maestro script.
Yeah, I mean, talking about backstories, just a lack of backstory or any sort of richness we have in the characters of Maestro compared to this, where you just want to
completely
opposite,
learn more right? About exactly.
What happened in their lives.
And no, but you're absolutely right. I do want. I just think it should have gone a bit more into detail as well. I just didn't think it was carried out. Because, like you said, you wanted to know more. I wanted to know more as well, and I think there was a bit of detail.
No, but the thing is, with these films, I think it's nice not to be overloaded with stuff. It's nice for it just to be delicately kind of peppered through the dialogue, rather than because that kind of takes you out of the present. It's nice to still be within the present. But you learn bits and pieces as things go along. I think there's
and also
Rowan's a poet. Honestly, the way he puts stuff, it makes sense. It makes sense.
The Rowan's spot on. And I was gonna say,
I see.
I was gonna say something that I mean, look, one thing that we don't want to do on this podcast is be demeaning to other viewers. We do it to you, buddy, but not to other novices. But one thing that I would say, my suggestion would be, I mean, I think this is a movie that warrants rewatching, but I think a lot of the details are actually there. I think if you go back and pick up on the one-liners, and it happens even early on, there's obviously a joke that one of the kids makes about, oh, this is the swimsuit that James Bond wore, and there's all these little things dropped in about their character. That's enough information, right? In that split second, it's telling us a lot. And sometimes the lead, I keep forgetting the name, Professor Hunnam, is it?
Yeah, Paul Hunnam.
Yeah.
He is sometimes in his kind of, whether it's a joke or whether it's a little sardonic kind of comment, he's obviously saying a lot about himself. And obviously we kind of putting the pieces together as we find out more and more. But I would say on this, I'd have to, again, without sounding mean, I think you're maybe completely wrong on this, body. I think the characters are so fleshed out, I think, to the point where it's another world from what we've seen so far. Because we mentioned Oppenheimer was a big one, right? We talked about Oppenheimer being all about the process. Obviously, the film's kind of on the nose about it's about the Trinity test and so on. With this, I mean, we're in a film about the Vietnam War going on in the backdrop and all the issues with that, but it's laser focused on those characters, and they kind of tell us everything we need to know, whether it's in nuanced moments where they're a bit upset or so on.
It's so nuanced. You don't get any direct commentary on anything political or even social. It's kind of done through just their struggles and their issues, which kind of makes it fresher in a way.
Yeah, okay. And there's a great line where he has his kiss and they're leaving the party, and I think it's Mary says the line where she says, "So why are we leaving?" He says, "Don't fuck it up for the little arsehole." And there's a great dark comedy to it, which is like, listen, he's an entitled little arsehole, but we've got his back, sort of thing. And there's something very American and genuine about that. But I would say a lot of it is kind of there. It's there for the taking, and it's a movie where if you just give it a little bit of effort, it has a lot to give back, I think. And that's what I said. I think it does warrant rewatching.
This is why I'm here. I'm here to learn. And so are the other novices. But you keep mentioning the war. Okay, the war, and obviously it is set in 1970 and 71. So, firstly, two bits of information I want to run past is, what did you guys think of the cinematography? Because we mentioned it in every episode and every film, it's important. But why also is it based during that time, and does it have that look or feel about it? Because it's not taken from, let's say, a novel, so it doesn't really, this story doesn't need to be set in the 70s, does it? Or
what I'll do, let me answer the Vietnam as a backdrop, and then I'll let Rowan do an answer on the look. Maybe we can kind of split it that way. I think on the Vietnam War front, I mean, you're always at risk of over reading. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true, but obviously you don't want to make yourself dull with talking about Vietnam and all the implications of it. But for example, in the film, it wears its badge quite firmly on its chest, right? Because we open with the death of Mary Lamb's child, right? So there's a very overt suggestion that this war has impacted someone directly. And for someone like Mary, she anyway is established as being kind of, even within the school, kind of on the fringes. So there's a sense inside of her that obviously comes out in kind of waves throughout, but there's a sense inside of her that she should, should she be wallowing in self-pity? Should she hate America? Should she hate people around her? Should she hate white people around her? There's a scene where they're going to eat food, and then there's a suggestion by one of the kids saying, "Why would she eat with us? She's getting paid," sort of thing. And obviously, Paul Giamatti snaps at that kid because he's able to kind of almost embody her pain in that moment, and says to him, "Don't be an entitled." He says that line about we live in, life is short and shit and so on. So the Vietnam War, you have to think of it as always kind of applying pressure to this movie, and that pressure is what causes these characters to act the way they act, right? And obviously different movies will do this about different things, but in this movie, the all of the characters have something at stake, right? And obviously Mary's is the clearest, but all of them have something at stake. So it's if you ever do rewatch it, I think it's important to bear that in mind, in the sense of that. I think it was Jimmy Carter. People say they call it the malaise speech, but I think he doesn't actually say malaise. But there's a kind of malaise about the characters that obviously comes from the Vietnam War, and how they kind of deal with it. So I think it makes the film more interesting and more digestible in a way, because there's a lot of context behind it, if that makes sense.
I mean, just to quickly interject, as a novice, the whole Vietnam thing, straight over. I mean, I knew there's some in some.
But you're a novice about film. You're obviously an expert on history.
History, a war, a military.
Wait, so you're a novice about everything?
Rowan, get the new podcast.
I overestimated you.
Get that
in the
new
film,
podcast,
I mean,
guys.
in the film, I didn't. it just didn't enter my mind.
Well, I mean,
Vietnam War didn't pop in because it's never specifically said, so it just didn't enter my mind.
No, I mean, to be honest, you don't need to have much understanding of the history.
But I was just going to say that. Yeah, I was
because we do get bits of information.
I'm not saying that that's
the
the reason why I kind of didn't understand it, or if I thought it's just in terms of that specific part, because you guys picked up on it, I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah, I mean the dialogue touches on the GI Bill and touches on him not being able to get into college or going to
I was just going to say
in order to get into college, and they
I know this is going back to military school. Like if you get kicked out, he has to go
it's
there.
a great way, because society was kind of, you had people who in order to get into college, they had to go to war to fight. A lot of them would die unless you could afford college and therefore didn't have to go into the army. So that kind of fractured society quite a lot.
And also, on just to add a little bit to Ron's point, the risk of being removed from the school at the end, obviously the risk that the boy has is that he will be sent to military school. And obviously sent to military school during, I mean, at that point in the 70s, the war's, raging through Southeast Asia. So obviously there's that extra additional layer. And also there's the fact that it's going on over Christmas, but a little birdie told me that Barty's going to ask that later. Boom. Rowan, tell us about
How
the
dare
look of the film.
What do you want?
This is the reason. Yeah. This is the reason why I don't give the questions out before.
The novices are awful at keeping secrets.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
cinematography, please. What do you guys think of it?
So Alexander Payne kind of has a reverence for 70s films, and that kind of look. So it wasn't, I guess, all political, but he kind of wanted to have that 70s look kind of lived in, but the film kind of does feel like a time capsule. You could put on a 70s movie and play it alongside this. They do a really good job of just adding that
70s style
to the film. 70s style in terms of cinematic techniques, but even just the film stock itself. They would, even despite it's being shot actually on an Alexa Mini, which is a pretty small digital camera, and you can buy that secondhand for like $25,000. Obviously not with all the chutney and lenses and stuff, but they do so much post-production to make it look like 70s film stock, which I think is quite cool.
Wait,
yeah,
Rowan,
he
are you
does
trying to
cite-
tell me it's not recorded on 35mm? Because is that what you're telling me?
It is not.
But Ron,
see,
what do you think? What do you think,
I
Ron?
would've- I
Though,
would've
in terms
thought-
of, I mean, just to quickly engage this, because we discussed it before the show, and I actually didn't. I thought it was shot on, and I mean, I thought
Same.
even
It's
potentially, I even thought potentially he went and got something from the 70s because, like you say, because of his reverence. But what do you think? Do you think it was just purely ease? I mean, shooting digital, like you said, the
Ease
Alexa
obviously
Mini is
comes into
smaller,
it a lot.
keeps
I
the
mean,
budget low.
It does. I mean, I looked at some of the behind the scenes stuff because someone was quite late coming. It's amazing how stripped down the set is, and the camera itself is so small, considering the image is so big and sort of rich with texture. But yeah, why they did that, I think they might not have been able to find a film stock, or yeah, I don't know. It might be to do with budget as well. I don't have an answer to that. But they do a lot to make it look straight out of some 70s archive, right? But not just in terms of the film stock. So in terms of loads of static shots, loads of you have these long dissolves between shots, which kind of adds to this haunted. It has like a haunted flavor and kind of
It goes a bit Kubrick. It goes a bit Kubrick in some.
The Shining does. The Shining does do some good dissolves like that. It kind of has a sense of loneliness, and despite time moving forward, it feels like you're kind of trapped within times. It's got a kind of a lonely loneliness to it, and which isn't used quite a lot. I think dissolves are an underused device.
What is a dissolve? Sorry,
But you have one shot which slowly dissolves into another, slowly basically changes into another. But you can
a bit like a fade. A bit like a fade. I mean, I'm trying to think what other apps would sort of call it, but maybe fade from one shot
like
to
a crossfade.
The other.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of that vibe.
You get a few seconds where you basically have two shots on top of each other. It's kind of ghostly. And it kind of, in like a lateral way, it kind of makes you think about the film is a little bit about history, and it kind of feels like you're kind of stuck and isolated within one time, and you can kind of link that into the films, or at least Paul Hunham's like reverence of history and how that studying history gives you insights into the present a bit.
That's true. Yeah.
It kind of heightens a feeling of isolation. But you also get some very old school wipe transitions, which you've never seen in films.
There's a few that came out. It took me, I mean, the film makes a concerted effort even from the credits and
you get sort of very retro
everything.
Titles. You even get a copyright in 19. It basically
that comes up
one of
on
the
the
prints
screen.
in Roman numerals says like 1971. It's trying its best to mimic just as if a film would look. You even get crash zooms, which kind of work. They're kind of funny. They lend like a playfulness to it, but it's all very 70s techniques.
But it looks legit. I mean, for people who, I mean, I know we live in a bit of an Instagram age where you can, download an app and it makes your photo look like it's taken on a, 60s Kodak or whatever. But to have a whole film done in that way and to have it screened, I mean, I wasn't fortunate enough to watch it in the cinema, which is a bit of a shame with hindsight because I think it's quite a beautiful film, but I can't. It's not easy to go and blow up a digital film with all those kind of post-production effects and things like that layered on. That's pretty respectable, and obviously Alexander Payne's obviously made a concerted effort, like we say, to really position it in that time, which is why I say that the period is obviously of relevance. But wait a minute, I can hear someone called Santa Claus is coming. What's he doing here?
Obeying on my questions. I don't believe it. Honestly, I don't believe it.
It'd be funny if you never ask about Christmas now, at any point. Just don't ask about Christmas.
It's not like we planned it or anything like that. Some people consider this a Christmas movie.
Wow, okay, we were not prepared for this. We are not prepared.
Sorry, I'll give you guys a few minutes. Think about your answers and tell me, do you guys think it's a Christmas film? Because ultimately, personally, I think even if it does fall under that category, it really doesn't matter. Yes, no, it is set over the Christmas period, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if it's considered a Christmas film.
I mean, if I were to ask you sort of now, the novice, I mean, what do you think is the kind of the Christmas film? If I just ask you for one off the top of your head, what would you
Bad
answer?
Santa.
Well, any Christmas film. My favorite Christmas film.
What do you think would be the one that you sort of pick up on?
Yeah, Home Alone. 1 and
So
2.
That's quite a good answer.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the answer I was expecting, because I was going to say that with the sense of Christmas films, obviously it's a variety of things, but sometimes it could be the case that the film is marketed as a kind of festive film, right? So Home Alone is a great example of that. It's a film that you kind of watch over Christmas. I mean, Christmas obviously factors in heavily into the story, but it's not necessarily fantastical about it in any way. Obviously, there's elements of it that contradict the sense of Christmas, but it does that obviously on purpose. But it's marketed heavily as a film, and then you have the almost and in that category you have these films like Elf is also maybe among those. Bad Santa is one that Ron mentioned. Then there's a kind of a second level of films that obviously use Christmas for thematic reasons, and I think this film obviously belongs there because it's. I don't think.
What do you say about Love Actually?
I would say that's in the first category. Yeah, I think that's a very Christmas.
What about Die Hard?
Die Hard is a very interesting one. I think Die Hard kind of belongs with something like. It's interesting because it's so kind of adult male kind of oriented. It uses Christmas in an interesting way because it starts off a bit cynical, but it kind of ends up being a bit kind of. I don't say a bit. It kind of opens up a little bit, emotionally. It could almost fit in the first category, Die Hard, and I know a lot of, especially American viewers, will watch that film religiously on Christmas.
Why do people get so offended? I know in the case of say Bruce Willis, he states that it's not a Christmas film, and in the case of the director of this movie, he also states that it's not a Christmas movie. But I don't understand why they're so annoyed about it. Like, who gives a shit? If people are watching the film.
So what Bruce Willis doesn't like Die Hard being referred to as a Christmas film. Interesting. I didn't know that was true. I actually thought Die Hard being a Christmas film is something quite. There's a kind of subversion to it. It's quite funny, I think, for it to be quite an overt action film, and it's kind of cemented itself as being a Christmas. I'll give a kind of counter example because for me, this film belongs in the kind of Christmas universe the same way that something like Eyes Wide Shut would be. Because in my opinion, Eyes Wide Shut is the best Christmas film ever made, right? But for people who've seen it, obviously Christmas just goes on in the background, right? It's just like a few Christmas trees and I mean, I think barely ever mentioned. I think it ends the final scene of Eyes Wide Shut. And apologies for spoiling it, so cover your ears. But it ends on them kind of doing, I think, Christmas shopping. It ends in this kind of toys store. But obviously,
isn't there a bit of a mix right now between just the backdrop or the context of a film versus a genre of a film? Like Eyes Wide Shut isn't a genre Christmas film at all. No. But just because it's the backdrops set in
and that's why I put it in. That's why I put it in that category too, where I also think this film belongs, right? Because it's by no means a Christmas genre film. Christmas goes on in the background, so does New Year's, right? But it goes on in the background. Obviously, it has its sort of logical script reasons because they're sort of stuck over that period in the school. But it also has that kind of, because Christmas, anything post Charles Dickens, Christmas is about people come together and they kind of open up and they share gifts and so on. So that film kind of confronts that a little bit. And so does Eyes Wide Shut in a kind of much more dark, cynical way. But this film is a bit more upfront about it. But I think the whole Christmas, like Rowan said, there's the genre of Christmas movies. So the ones that we mentioned before. And then there's this where Christmas is an important, but I think still there's something quite studious about it, right? It goes on in the background and it doesn't really hit you in the face that much. A bit like the Vietnam War. I mean, this film could, if there was a big library that's like Vietnam War films and Christmas films, the librarian would be like, where the fuck am I putting this movie, right? Like, it'd go crazy deciding, do I go here or do I go here? Because it has both kind of in the background for obvious political, sociological reasons, I think.
A Christmas film has to sort of accommodate all people, right? Because people get together and they watch. Maybe they watch films.
Who are you,
So
the
it might
local
not
MP
be-
or something like?
I know, like,
He's like,
if
well,
it's gonna be
guys,
a
listen,
Christmas-
Christmas films. Like, look, if it's got hate, I'm not having it. Okay, back
Out,
off,
it's
lads.
out.
There could be a kind of retroactive Christmasification of this movie because the lead in it kind of does have a. I mean, Scrooge arguably is. I mean, would say maybe the kind of iconic Christmas character, and there is. I mean, Paul Giamatti's performance is a bit Scrooge-like, right? I mean, there's a sense of he's pushing people away, and in the beginning, usually they joke about him being. I think there's one kid says, "Oh, I thought all the Nazis were in South America or something like that." You know, see, poking fun at him. But there's a kind of obviously a Scroogeness to it. So it could be the case that even if it's not, whether that's through marketing or the subject matter, I think over time there could be a kind of retroactive, Christmas allure to the movie because it does kind of follow. I mean, I mentioned Charles Dickens, but it does follow this strand of someone like a Scrooge-like figure who eventually sort of comes to accept, which is a bit of a trope, but obviously I think the film does it quite well. So I think it's maybe more Christmassy than it lets on. But I guess there's also marketing issues with marketing something as a Christmas film because a Christmas film it suggests that kids can watch it and it suggests that you should sort of sit around the fire. I don't know why people sit around fires now in Christmas and watch
Sit
this
around the
movie.
fire.
Yeah, TV on top of the fire burning slowly, the Samsung logo just
having some
dripping
mulled
down.
wine. Well, one of my last questions with regards to the film is the music. It's not too heavy. There is some sounds here and there, especially in the beginning of the film.
There's a good track by Labi Siffre, the closing song.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if what is that called?
I'm not too sure, but I know in the beginning.
It's a very indie kind of. Obviously, there's a few because I've seen where she puts on
Crying,
kind of
laughing, loving line.
old songs.
By whom?
Okay.
That's quite a good one. Labi Siffre is like an English singer-songwriter poet.
Oh, okay.
Interesting, Labi.
I'm glad that it's not too heavy on the music front. It wasn't because if it is set around Christmas, you tend to have that kind of
cheesy Christmassy bullshit.
that orchestral
jingle
kind
bells
of like,
going on.
all of that
So
stuff.
glad it didn't stoop to that bullshit.
Yeah, music
glad it
doing all
kept
the
its own
lifting.
style.
Yeah.
I mean,
glad
there's
that
quite a lot of diegetic music. Diegetic means shot like as part of the film reality.
Yeah.
So, as opposed
This is for the other film novices, not me.
it's for this specific film novice.
Um,
But you have like the hymns, you have stuff like that, and I guess background music, but it's not being.
It
It's not
definitely
being
keeps to
thrown
its
at
own
you,
style. If it is a Christmas film, it definitely has its own style. It doesn't do that.
Well, I think it has a very indie cinema kind of sound to it, and I agree that they don't resort to using sort of classic, the big swelling strings when he's about to quit or whatever, because that I agree would have, for me.
But that's so un-Alexander Payne.
No, for sure, and I didn't expect it, but I just mean it's nice for a film like this because, like I said, that it does fall a little bit on. There's a few tropes that we see sometimes in movies like this where it's like a lack of a father figure and someone emerges as a father figure and characters who kind of dislike each other are sort of brought together. So they're there in sort of trope form, but done carefully, So and I think the music is one of the keys to it because that's another very 70s thing, that sort of emergence of different styles of music, and obviously the film plays on it quite well, uses it I think quite well, and obviously mixes. Rowan mentioned the diegetic sound again, the scene where she's playing the music at the party and she kind of snaps at the guy. That's also a great scene. But the music, I did mean to ask because I didn't have the chance to look it up, but was it made for the movie or is it a is it just an ensemble of existing songs? Because they sound a bit timeless, but I almost didn't recognize any of the songs that play over.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely obviously check.
But Jamie's probably on that as we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says the musical score is composed by Mark Orton. Soundtrack featured 24 tracks, seven of them being something. Hold on.
Well, we'll definitely check. Obviously, we can't.
Well, basically, people listening to this, go check it on your own. We're not your.
Yeah, 7 of them being from Autumn's score, and the remainder being songs from prominent artists.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's a blend of.
Yeah. Damien Jurado, Labi Siffre, as I mentioned, Andy Williams, the Allman Brothers.
Okay.
Make a little appearance. Yeah. It's good. I mean, Sideways, we mentioned that earlier, which is Alexander Payne's earlier film with Paul Giamatti, has a great sort of jazzy score. You get some Charles Mingus. It just works with the whole mellow sort of buddy film going through wine country sort of thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. This film,
film actually,
given
Sideways.
to a worse director, it could have collapsed into lameness quite easily. But given the tropes you mentioned, but Alexander Payne, I'm sure he has a big sort of control over the score. He wouldn't let some of that bullshit.
His experience shows, because he knows how to take control of those tropes. Because I think if you give enough time and effort, you'll find tropes in every film, right? Tropes are, I mean, they're the main drivers of things like beats.
Picking up on this point,
moments.
There were some blatant contrivances, but they don't subtract from the film much for me. Like there was the fact they all get whipped up into that helicopter, leaving the two of them, and then the dad being psychotic. That kind of nagged me a little bit.
I was going to get onto these points as well, because I didn't understand the whole. Look, there's just a helicopter now that's going to come take 5 kids away. I know they've got permission from
I don't mind the actual the mechanics of it. Kind of adds to the elitism a little bit. The fact you can just swoop in there and
I think
it was just a bit odd.
I think the helicopters felt very dark comedy to me. Again, I mean, I'm harping on about Vietnam War, and it's going to sound boring the fuck out of everyone, but there's something a bit, when he hears the chopper, it was almost like a kind of tiny little Apocalypse Now reference, right? There's a chopper coming to pick up. I mean, anyone who's studied a little bit about Vietnam War knows just how important choppers are to people escaping Vietnam and things like that. So there's obviously, I think, a little bit of an in joke there. And obviously the other suggestion is that, and Paul Giamatti is quite overt.
I think that's stretching it a little bit.
I don't think so. I think in a film like this, you kind of work with whatever you have, right? Because it is so contained. Because you have to remember, and from a filmmaking point of view, helicopters aren't just on standby, right? There's obviously a concerted effort to bring a helicopter in, so there's clear rationale. And I think Vietnam War is one of them. And if Alexander Payne wants to come on this show and prove me right, I'll pay for his Uber. But the other one is that...
no, he'll be coming in a helicopter. So.
But the other one... Uber helicopter, no problem. But the other one is that... that obviously the suggestion is that some of these kids are super rich, right? And there's that division. Because obviously Mary's character is a clear kind of divider there.
You get the feeling Mary's like stuck there. And same with Paul Hunnam. They're kind of like... They're isolated in this bleak sort of New England winter, right? But then one of the parents, one of the dads just comes in, swoops down, picks them up. He's like the savior sort of thing.
And there's a kind of backdrop of people like James Bond, who's mentioned early on. There's this kind of almost a jokey element to it all, and it leaves like I said, Mary's
the class divide is big in it.
And Mary's an interesting one because in terms of class divide, her treatment of it is quite interesting and organic, and again her performance, and she's been nominated. I think it's a great performance and she deserves that also, but her performance in it is a great kind of balancing act, right? Because she's very overt about the fact that she's a lot poorer than the students, but she kind of deals with everything with a sort of great sense of care and passion. And obviously the times where she kind of breaks away from it, that's why they're extra touching, right? Because if she's just ruthlessly bitter throughout, you could do that, lazy screenwriting. You could just make it like, my son died, da 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 da. But they never resort to that. She's kind of forced to stay in her role, and she knows how to break, there's sort of elegant waves of her character breaking in and out. And obviously when they peak, the film, provides that kind of emotional beat for you to kind of ride on, because it is sad. I mean, her when she plays the music and she snaps at the guy, obviously the guy knows nothing about her backstory, right? But we do. We've been let in.
Yeah.
And there's a great moment there where her snapping, and obviously she breaks down a bit in the corridor. It's similar to in terms of great performances like this. People who've seen Moonlight will know that Juan's character in that has a similar moment where when he's asked, "Oh, do you sell drugs?" And because we've been letting just enough, is that emotional swell, even though it seems small from the outside, because you can have them break down, you can have the violins come out and everything, but because it's a small moment, we've been letting enough to know, well, just how much this means to this person. And I think that performance is done so well.
I mean, all the characters, and it's kind of a sign of good screenwriting that they're kind of trying to maintain this veneer of just being normal and trying to fit into their role and do their job, and even the kid. But obviously, Paul Hunnam is hiding behind his academia. She's not being upfront about her troubles. But and the kid, I mean, he doesn't openly talk about his situation at all. He obfuscates he doesn't mention his dad. He mentions his dad. His dad died, right?
Yeah. He lashes out almost actually, less, and he says,
But calling him dead is obviously, it's to him less humiliating than him being in a psych ward. So all of the characters hide behind this veneer of normal.
And also with Professor Hunnam, there's the other side where he's kind of hiding behind this kind of veneer of, oh, I don't care about relationships and things like that. And there's a great scene where he looks back and I think she's a receptionist at the school or something. She ends up kissing her husband, and obviously there was a suggestion before that there's a bit of chemistry, and there's
for sure.
I mean, Paul Giamatti. I mean, this look, he's so seasoned, right? This guy's he can perform at a drop of a hat, but that look that he gives back is. Oh, it's painful to watch, but
it really is.
With a Miss Crane.
But then he's obviously when it comes to the son having sort of a little dalliance with the other girl, he's totally
the niece.
He's oblivious to it, right? He's
oblivious, but he's also he's quick to like sort of chide him for that, right?
Yeah. He quickly tries to bring him out, and also I was going to say on that Paul Giamatti moment, it goes to show when you have a director, and this is another reason why I think the film warrants a lot of respect, but when you have a director like, they've worked together in the past, like Ron said, but when you have Alexander Payne, Paul Giamatti, they clearly have a sense of, they know what each other's good at, and in that scene it's so easy to, and I'm talking about the scene where he sees her kissing the husband, I think he's the husband, it's so easy in that moment to maybe linger a second too long, make it a bit melodramatic, go a bit telenovela.
Just adding another layer to the film.
But the shot is, it just moves, it moves on in a kind of way, but all the impact is still there, right? It's like you just had a quick car accident and it's like, okay, get out, we need to, change cars or whatever. And it's done so well. And there's that look back where I was like, oh, there's a great kind of Greek tragedy to it all, but all done in a kind of microsecond, right? So good, that scene.
But the character's painted as he's so vile. I mean, not itself, but just obviously you have the eye, you have the smelling of fish because you have some condition. On the face of it, if this script was given to a worse director, it would turn into, he's like Quasimodo, right?
They'd play him, right? Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because he's on top of all of those things. He's obviously maybe not introvert because he's a teacher, but he's obviously, like, for example, with the party scene, when he leaves, he says, he goes, "This is why I hate parties, because that was a disaster."
One funny shot is when he tries to throw the football into the field.
I enjoyed that.
He's got such confidence with it, but then.
But when he's chasing Tully and into the gym, and then Tully,
and he watches.
I thought that scene, and he starts shouting.
He has some great lines, and also in the cinema when he's talking and he tells the guy, "Fuck off!"
Fuck off.
Throws it at him. Yeah, great. His performance.
But Alexander Payne is great at making comedy out of just the banal. He doesn't. It's nothing. It's not big, elaborate. It's just like little.
But
things.
Did you guys notice how his lazy eye changes from one eye to the other through different scenes?
I actually did, but I didn't detract from anything.
Yeah, but also there's the film is quite overt with it, because obviously it ends with him. Well, towards the end, because he's asked earlier on, which eye do I look at? So there's almost an in joke there of, is this being put on or so on. But it adds, I think, to the kind of the bizarreness of the professor's character, right? Because he's inscrutable, to quote our own time. He's inscrutable early on in a way, But as he opens up, he becomes massively likable. And I think there's something to be said again about script and performance, but to make a character like that likable is not easy. Unless you're doing, unless it's a Pixar animation, to maintain that, and for the audience to walk away and say, well, he was like the most likable character. That's a tough job, because you look at it, for example, the student, he doesn't quite achieve that. Mary does, obviously, but her likability stems from other things. But Paul Giamatti, I mean, we can talk about nominations for best actor, but
I think Mary always is kind of likable. There's no point where you kind of dislike her.
She's set up as more likable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ostensibly, he's set up as he's the villain of the whole school.
He's given a lot more.
But the more he becomes himself, I think he has a low self-esteem.
100%. He's hiding behind
the more he's himself,
he was giving Meditations, the ultimate stoic sort of philosophy book.
The Meditations is interesting.
The whole box, and he's got a whole box of them as well.
I also do like when he's confronted by his old classmate, and then he drops that line about, I'm glad you sort of landed on your feet, or something like that. And as he's walking away, he gets asked, why did you lie? I thought Barton boys don't lie, and so on. And he has a great line, which I feel like I'll use one day, where he says he's not entitled to my story, which I think is a great and a very Marcus Aurelius kind of line. But he says, he's not entitled to my story, which is very on brand for that character. But again, another scene where it's like that moment where he obviously breaks out into a lie is so close to being a big trope, right? They lie for each other. It's very, a lot of kind of indie comedies did it,
90s,
But because that film, it builds enough respect for us where that trope is, because tropes sometimes do happen, but that trope is worked in a very nice way.
It's handled very delicately.
A lot of the context and stuff builds on to make that trope palatable, because if you don't have that stuff in the background, tropes quickly just become like, well, this is bullshit, right? I'm watching a kid's movie, I'm watching, I don't know, I know I was about to name a film, but I don't want to lay into other films.
Alrighty.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, let me just check to see if I've got anything else.
You're not deploying that in here. I love you said deploying like it's a fucking like a Hawk missile or something,
Well, I mean, one question. I don't think the film. One of the questions I was going to, do you think the film? Is there anything the film should have done better? Is there anything that the film is missing that you think if it had gone maybe towards this kind of route?
I think it has almost too much. There's a lot of richness to it, but the thing is, it's the tropes which Dennis kind of we touched on, the tropes which are handled delicately by Alexander Payne and the great performances and the great script. But it's those tropes which make it work in a way, being a Christmas movie, because that elicits that sentimental feeling which you kind of want at Christmas. But so without the tropes, it would feel a bit barren. I might actually prefer the film a little bit more because I like a bit more of a minimal sort of film. But with the tropes done in that way, I think it's worked perfectly.
I mean, the only thing that I'll say in answer is, I mean, I like the film a lot, and there isn't a glaring issue with it. I mean, I would maybe like to see a universe where this film is shot on the cameras that they're kind of, imitating in that sense. For example, I like the look of, people have seen the Oceans films by Steven Soderbergh. He has it's kind of very widescreen, 35mm look, and he has a kind of grain to it, which maybe this film would have benefited from. But then again, thinking about it in hindsight, obviously the film is looking for, it has a on purpose cheap feel, and I think actually the more I watched the film, the more I was kind of absorbed by it. So I think the film doesn't have any glaring mistakes. I mean, it's not, obviously we felt that Maestro didn't warrant a nomination at all, but since it's here, it's very unlike Maestro, right? There isn't glaring issues that when I sit and watch it, I think, why? What's the need? Why not this? Why not? With this, I actually felt, I was there for the ride, and for that reason, I think the director, the actors, the script, they worked in harmony. And any good film, it has those things working in harmony. When you see it play out on the screen, you can see that those actors have embraced that script 100%. They've made those characters their own. Paul Giamatti, for me, in this is so far the best male performance, I think, from the films that we've seen. I think his performance is amazing. It's funny, it's a bit dark, it's witty, it's a bit, I mean, it goes into a bit bizarre, but does it again in a good way. So I wouldn't really pick out anything glaring, and I think overall actually a really good movie.
Yeah. It's a hard question, right? Because you change the genre, and it kind of fits perfectly within. As I said before, Alexander Payne he works better within these confines, within the genre. He does. I mean, Election was set in a high school. Sideways is like a buddy film. He likes simple, character-driven scripts. Yeah. With a film like what's the one where they downsizing, right? I think that might have just been too much of a project for him, right? Because that film kind of detours and doesn't end the way it started.
Well, it's very unlike Alexander because it's so. I mean, the kind of concept of it all it leads away in that movie, which doesn't feel very Alexander Payne. But I do think that people, if they did like this film, definitely watch Sideways. About Schmidt is also an interesting.
But Paul Giamatti was nominated for that back in 2004. Didn't get it.
Nah, but so he needs to. Okay, we'll finish the series obviously and see March 10th. It's not too far away, but I love him in this.
Imagine
movie.
If Bradley Cooper fucking gets this.
If Bradley Cooper gets this, I'm going to change this podcast to scrutinize nothing. And it's going to be us just in silence every hour.
I know I'm a novice, but fucking hell, no, that is...
But I am curious, because we've gone past the hour mark. And
I'm curious to see what a novice's final rating is after our glowing sort of reviews.
Yeah, give us a rate. I want you to take a rating. I want you to put it in a kind of object form, and I want you to sort of smush it in my face, because that for me is the fetish that keeps me going. Bardi, go.
I mean, you took it too far. I'm always going to be truthful with these reviews. I had a figure coming in before we did the podcast, but you know, as a novice, this is why I'm here. This is why I think
tell us the original figure, and then tell us the new one. Yeah.
Hey, I'm building.
Okay, you got
I'm
it.
setting the scene.
Right, nice.
I'm setting the scene.
He's working the stage. He's working the stage.
I'm learning.
Bro.
I'm like
Jimmy Kimmel over here.
So I had a figure coming in, and this is why we're here, so I can learn, and so the listeners can learn what is actually important when you're looking at a film. The number that I was going to give it coming in, genuinely was going to be a 5. Okay, and I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay.
For those reasons, because we are comparing it to something like Maestro, which already has a story, you know, that
So you jumping 50% is testament to our incredible analysis.
Exactly.
Yeah,
because well, the reason is because when you compare it to something like Maestro, which is a shit film, but that story kind of exists, and they butchered it. And you're coming from a unique story, you know, uniquely written. I don't think it's from anywhere.
Completely original.
Completely original. And the fact that that's not taken into consideration and not nominated is a shame. And when you do look at, was it Paul Gianni? What was his name?
Paul Giamatti.
Paul Giamatti, sorry. His performance, I think he does warrant a win compared to all the other candidates we have on there. All right, he's got some strong competition like maybe Cillian Murphy, but definitely not fucking Bradley Cooper. You know, it's a joke.
Cillian Murphy can fuck off, man. It's Paul Giamatti's year.
I'm gonna be careful because I hope that they eventually join us on this show. I want the show to be big enough where we can get these people on. So I'm not gonna F and Jeff on anyone.
But by that time, they'll have to do a lot of.
Maybe it's something you start doing from now because we've heard your other episodes.
There'll be androids by then, yeah.
But yeah, so my rating of it, and you have to understand, for this film, is not for a lot of novices. A lot of things are going to go over their heads, and they're not going to understand. Genuinely, it warrants a rewatch, and I think you do have to understand film to a certain level to really, really appreciate it. So that's why I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. And I hope after I rewatch it, it can definitely go up to an 8. Once I take into account
these
everything
numbers
that
are
you guys said.
awfully flexible. But that's good. I'm glad we've changed.
Well,
your
coming
mind.
from the guy who's the first one to change his review of Oppenheimer, I only lead.
That's
I
true.
can only so.
Yeah, Rowan, you guys changes. Changes.
Changes.
All right, Rowan, give us your review.
7.5 out of 10. Great movie.
Right,
Definitely
right.
watch it. Definitely going to rewatch it tonight.
I would rewatch this most Christmases. I think it's fucking amazing.
Wow.
That's all I have to say.
Okay.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
Can we
Any
put a figure next
numerical-
to it?
Any numerical value to that?
I think the kid, although you didn't seem to like his performance, I think he did a good job at playing like a. He had quite a psychotic, aplomb, like kind of confidence to him, and it was his first role doing anything film related. I think he did a
nice.
pretty good job.
Yeah, I
And obviously
found him
we've been
quite
talking about
charming in
Giamatti.
a way. Yeah.
Giamatti is going to be kind of the Oscar nominee here, and he's highly praised. But I think that kid will have a good future in acting.
Yeah,
Dominic
fair enough.
Sessa, whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, cinematography was great. The film handled these tropes well, as we mentioned. It's linear, it's simple, but it's also beautiful and touching, and I felt emotional. And it wasn't because of some sort of Spielberg's type sentimentality, although it takes something that could have been done that way, but does it purely. And I like the fact also that it's set on all like in locations around Boston. It's all very authentic. It feels like you've just been transported there. Even everything down to the little like toothpaste and the little things you get on the sides and everything.
Yeah.
It's a nice feeling. You can just be taken back to that time, and it does it so well. I'm gonna give the film a 9.
Damn, son. Look at Rowan sitting back.
I'm
like-
happy just thinking about it. Gives me a warm
I'm
feeling
happy just
inside.
thinking about it. It makes me feel warm inside. Like, I can't.
It makes me feel
help
so
it.
warm inside. Just the feeling I get when I help novices as well. That gives me a warm feeling.
Ah, there we are. At least we're both giving you positive feelings. So that's the main thing.
Yeah,
Dennis?
it's hard to.
Look at
I mean,
Dennis
I don't
like
wanna-
some poet. I don't know where to begin with.
No, because
thing-
Rowan said a lot. Rowan said a lot of. I mean, I think a lot of what he said is spot on. Actually, I agree.
So I'm influencing your score as well. I'm liking
I thought
Got
before you. I
power.
thought about before you. But the only thing that I'll say is that sometimes you don't need to be groundbreaking to be good, and it feels a lot, especially these days. It feels a lot like you have to really push new ground over and over again to be good, right? To really be a movie. But this one shows that if you do all the basics right, you're gonna get it right. And then it's like Rowan said, there's a kind of rewatchability to it. I do think it has a Christmas charm, whether or not obviously the marketing reflects that, like I said. But I do think it has a rewatchability. I think the characters are super charming. I think Paul Giamatti, he brings that kind of Scrooge character back into the kind of modern consciousness in such a funny and charming and sweet way. I do think his performance alone is worth watching. Obviously, we've got 2 Oscar nominees for acting, but I think come for Paul Giamatti because he does a great job. In terms of my score, I'm not going to go into a 9 because 9s and 10s are, I think you're getting into the real kind of masterpiece territory, but I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think it's a movie that it sets out its table and it gets everything right. There's no, like you mentioned, what would you improve? I said there was no glaring issues. I think good performances, good script, good directing. If you've got these 3 things, obviously things like editing and stuff, you can be creative and the film tries to be, but there's sort of 3 cores. It does so well, and I'm sure people who have seen it will enjoy it more on a rewatch. So yeah, 8.5.
Definitely.
Nice.
Definitely.
I mean, to be honest, I doubt this will win Best Picture. But
I doubt it too
And
because
to be honest,
it's not bombastic enough. Maybe
it's not much of a statement. It's just
although some films
like
like this
intense
do
film.
do sneak into do sneak it into the like they do win it. I mean, Coda, for example, I think kind of in some ways had that vibe of maybe it's not bombastic enough to win. So I think it could do. I think it could charm the judges. I wouldn't put money on it. So if William Hill, whatever's typing away while I say this, but there's a small part of me that if that name is read out, I'm not gonna fall off my chair. I would think, you know what, I can see that all the judges were endeared to it, but again, unlikely. But maybe it does like the bombastic element of something like Oppenheimer, maybe, which seems to be. But if Maestro wins it, you may as well start making films. Honestly, leave the channel, go make films, win an Oscar, come back.
No,
boost it.
Well, watching this film after Maestro, I'm not just saying it, but it was like it like kind of made it so much fucking better. Just the fact we were comparing it to that load of bollocks.
Yeah, and an example of what I said, when those things align, that I said in my review, the directing, the screenwriting, the acting, when those things perfectly align, there's a great harmony. A film feels effortless to watch. And we said it with Killers of the Flower Moon as well. I mean, this is a 3+ hour movie, but because those things align, you kind of just, I don't know, it's effortless to sit through, right? And then some of that Maestro, for me, the opposite was true. I found some scenes amazingly tedious to sit through, and obviously it sounds like we're just shitting on the film for abstract reasons, but I think it's purely just sitting down and watching it. It's just a bit tedious, and this movie for me is the complete opposite. It's so smooth. I feel like I just run my finger along the top of it. The texture of it works so well. So
it's the perfect analogy to end on.
Amazing.
I could just honestly.
Next episode, we just feel films.
Yeah.
We just get the film stock and just rub it around our body.
Textural, but I do, sometimes you do feel that way, right? When you watch a movie, it feels like it has almost like a physical.
It's textural, 100%.
Texture.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the argument for analog film. It's like it's got a realness to it.
Yeah, I agree, but I think, like you said, I think it's a nice way to end because
I was fearful Dennis would be scathing of this, but I'm glad we both like it. And
oh really? Well, I
I
purposefully didn't. I mean, for the 8.5 listeners that listen to this, I purposely tried to avoid giving my review of the film before we sit here, just because I want the kind of reveal, if that makes sense, to be as authentic as possible.
Nice.
And when I watched it, I was curious. I did think, what do they think I'm gonna think of it? But yeah, let's see what we're doing next week.
I mean, I want to try and do Poor Things. If we can somehow get that, or if you can make it to the theatre.
Poor Things is that should be our nicknames because I'm struggling to get listeners.
Struggling to get cinema tickets.
Struggling to just watch the film, let alone.
I had a nightmare last night. I was sweating. I woke up in a sweat because all the subscribe buttons had disappeared from the universe, and there was like a big uproar. It was a bit like a kind of nuclear fallout. But I woke up and I was sweating. I went into YouTube and I realized the subscribe button is still there. So why the hell aren't people pressing it? Okay.
If you're listening to it, it just takes 2 seconds. Subscribe, boom, and then if you want, leave a little comment as well. Leave a like.
Yeah. Comment, be like, why I hate Bardi, this is the reason why.
Oh, well, don't give him any. Alright, calm down. Let's not give him any ideas. Write whatever you want. If you want to write that, write that.
The first line, I'll write, I hate Bardi.
No, wait, hold on. They can write that if they want to, but don't give them ideas.
And these are the reasons why.
When do novices get the right to vote? Let's try that one.
But again, don't let these two cinema twats fucking influence your decision. If you want to write that, you can do, but you write down what you want.
Yeah, or just create a blog. I hate Bardi. This is the reason.
We don't have to go that far. Again,
I can contribute
we don't have to.
I'll pay for it. I'll pay for the website. I'll pay for the Squarespace. Is that our sponsor, by the way? Who's our sponsor this week? Twinings.
Twinings.
How much are we charging for a sponsor? How much are we Walker's crisps or something. That was crunching in the background.
We need to get some sponsors one of these days.
Definitely, it's coming soon. Definite. I mean, if we can just get
guys, we set a challenge. Next Oscars, I want to be sponsored by Rolls-Royce. Let's do it. Rolls-Royce, and I want Bardi to be recording from a car, and he's like driving too fast. He's like, guys, I can't.
Perfect. Well, boys, it's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Nice one.
And then until next time, subscribe, like, comment, share it as much as you can.
Yes. Scrutinise this.
Scrutinise this.
Over and out.
Boys.
Boom.